Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
Dig deep into some real social issues.
Interesting and kind of mind-blowing.
So funny. Really will make you laugh out loud.
It is such a good book.
How make-believe and real life can become blurred.
And the way they communicate, even between species.
Crying on my front porch in a certain moment.
She is just a wonderfully funny and sharp writer.
And her experiences of being an outsider but finding her own path to success.
Today, our show is devoted to favorite books of 2023. We've got two guests in studio who select books for libraries in St. Louis and St. Louis County. First, we have Jennifer Alexander, Collection Development Librarian at St. Louis County Library. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
And we also have Ted Reidy, Material Selector at St. Louis Public Library. Ted, welcome.
Thank you very much, Elaine.
So glad to have you both here today. So let us start with something that is easy. One of the things someone had said to me was, if you bite off more than you can chew faster. I'm a slow reader. Is there a book on each of your lists that you would recommend to someone who is just starting to get back into a reading habit? Ted?
Absolutely, yes. So The Beast You Are by Paul Tremblay, it's actually a collection of short stories, sort of a horror sci-fi genre. And there's sort of something in there for everyone. They come in a lot of different formats, a lot of different styles. One is written like an epic poem, sort of like Beowulf, or one is written as a series of letters to a fictional magazine. And when I was reading this, it really kept you guessing and kept you engaged, because you could finish a story, but you could start a new one and you'd have a totally new experience.
Mm-hmm. I find short stories are, it's less commitment, right?
Of course.
And Jennifer, how about you?
It's a great question, because I think all of us changed our reading habits a little bit after COVID, our attention spans and so
Absolutely.
forth. And so it changed kind of how we can process things. I think nonfiction can be good to keep your attention. And The Wager by David Gran is a very exciting narrative nonfiction about a shipwreck and mutiny. And I think it could keep your attention.
Okay, so those two books, Jennifer, you say The Wager, A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder by David Gran.
Yeah, it's about an incident in which there was a shipwreck, and then they left the captain on an island, and then when they got back to civilization, there was a trial for mutiny, and
wow,
it's all about the different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it would be quite fast-paced, too, as
Very, and he goes off in all different directions, so you learn about life on the ship, you learn about various disgusting diseases, and a lot of things.
Disgusting diseases. So, Ted, you had mentioned The Beast You Are by Paul Tremblay. Is there anything in there that moves quickly? I mean, obviously, if it's a short story, but there are some that
Yes.
might move a little faster.
I'm having trouble remembering the names of the specific stories, but there is one about a man dealing with grief, having lost his partner, I believe his wife, and she sort of comes back as a ghost. And that one is really sort of ethereal and nice to read, because it doesn't quite drag you along, but you're pulled into it because you want to know what's going on. Like you want to feel, why is this man feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way when I'm reading it, right? And that was probably my favorite of those short stories.
Right. On the St. Louis On the Air Facebook page, David writes, "My favorite fiction book was The Bandit Queens." So something about nautical sort of thing. It focused on women who have to work together to murder their husbands and rise out of poverty. And it's set in India. It was funny, dramatic, and suspenseful. And David adds that the best nonfiction book he read this year was Waxing On, a memoir about Ralph Macchio as the Karate Kid. He says, I loved this book because I grew up on the original Karate Kid movies and in recent years reconnected through binging Cobra Kai on Netflix. So if you have a book that you loved that you'd like to share, please be sure to give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 314-382-TALK. You can send us an email as well at talk@stlpr.org. With what David mentioned, Jennifer, is there anything on your list that that has some connection to either the Karate Kid, or maybe something that that could make for a really interesting film adaptation?
Well, the Karate Kid mention reminded me of that this was a huge year for celebrity memoir. So it seems like more than a year ago, but the Prince Harry book really came out in January. And we also had just so many this year, Britney Spears and just a ton of celebrity memoir. And out right now and hard to get at the library is My Name is Barbara by Barbara Streisand.
That one was a surprise to me at how popular that was.
Me too. So what Ted and I do is we order and we decide how many to order, and many more people wanted to read it than we.
Yeah, I noticed on both of our ends. I was like, oh, I have to order more of these.
Yes.
People want to read it.
And it's a giant book. It is close to 1,000 pages. It's like 970 pages. So if you wanted something short and fast moving, I think this is it.
Not that one.
Not that one.
Why did it surprise you that it was popular, Ted?
I'm not sure. I think because the Britney Spears one was coming up and we had to order so many of that before, just to fill holds before it even came out. People were hungry for this book. And Britney Spears, of course, has been in the news a lot recently, and I think comparing that to Barbara Streisand, I was like, oh, all the people who love their memoirs, well, they're going to be busy with the Britney Spears book.
Right.
Let's only buy a few of these Barbara Streisand books. And then I bought them, and there was a bunch of holds, so I bought more. I think I got them in before they came in for the first time.
And it turns out that it's just a great story because I think everyone agrees that she's hugely talented.
Of course.
But it wasn't just like a slam dunk that she would have the career that she did. She had to really push. Like she was thwarted in many times. So it's kind of an interesting story of her will, I guess.
Right. And again, that was Barbara Streisand's My Name is Barbara, Barbra.
Yes.
Right? And that is a memoir. Lamise emails, the best book I read this year is A Day in the Life of Abed Salama by Nathan Thrall. Ted, it's something that you recognize, a nonfiction written in fiction-style narration that came out last month. Lamise says, it depicts everyday life in multiple Palestinian families as they deal with the tragedy. It includes lots of historic facts told through daily struggles. It is a must-read for anyone who wants to understand what it is like for millions of Palestinians who want nothing more than raising a family. 5 stars.
Yes. So I actually heard about this book through one of our customers suggesting a purchase. If people don't know, you can go onto our website and the county's website, I believe, and find a link that'll let you suggest a purchase for the library to buy. And I was not familiar with this title before until I saw a customer, suggest that we buy it. And I saw it and was like, wow, this seems great, and this is going to go well. So I know I bought several copies of that. I, of course, haven't had a chance to read it yet. But from the reviews I read, it seems like a unique and really compelling work of nonfiction.
Okay. And again, that's A Day in the Life of Abed Salama by Nathan Thrall. So this brings me to another question. Jennifer, among the books that you have selected, are there ones, or is there one in particular that you came to because there were patrons who were asking for it and that you really enjoyed yourself?
Oh, yes. So that happens all the time, Pretty much like my reading totally changed because of this job. So, yeah, you see things that are very popular and then you read it. So I probably would not have picked up Tom Lake by Ann Patchett if I hadn't seen previously how popular her books are and heard people talk about her books. So this is actually set during the first parts of the COVID pandemic, and we're seeing lots more fiction now that show us during that time. And it's just a woman recalling a romance of her youth and telling her daughters. And it's just a family on a cherry farm, and it's just a beautiful book.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of thing that I would normally have picked up.
Why is that?
I don't know. It just wasn't my kind of thing. But now, after learning more just by seeing all these books, I'm like, oh, yeah, this sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it.
She's very prolific. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
She has a long career.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, on that note about long careers, is there a book among the ones that you have selected, Ted, that come from an author you have followed for some time? Maybe one whose work you look forward to?
Yes, actually. So this made my list, and it's got a little bit of an asterisk on it because it started coming out in 2014, but it just finished up its run this year. That is a manga series called Golden Kamui, which I've been reading for almost 5 years now as it comes out. It's really wonderful. It takes place in the aftermath of the Russo-Japanese War, follows a veteran and a young Ainu girl that is a indigenous population to the northern Hokkaido island of Japan. I didn't know any of this before I read the book, and it's one of those books that it has everything. You'll learn so much about history, politics, ecology. I mean, I learned so much about the birds that they have in the Hokkaido island of Japan just from reading this. But, it'll make you laugh. It'll make you cry. It's really great, and I was really excited to see it finish up this year, to see, that author get, almost a 10-year series under their belt and done, and see what they move on to next.
Mm-hmm. And that series, again, is Golden Kamui?
Golden Kamui, yes.
Kamui by Satoru Noda.
Yes.
So does that mean that the entire series is available through the library?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that every volume of that, which I think, oh no, actually the last volume, because they come out in chapters first, before they come out in volumes. The last volume will be here in January, but
okay.
Up until then, it is available. You might have trouble finding it because, there's 30 of them, and you have to figure out which branch is it at, how to put a hold on it. But,
right.
Yeah, I've turned a lot of my friends at the library onto it. Like, look, we have it. You should read it. Mm-hmm. And that's how,
Yeah, and you were nodding as he was talking.
Yeah, you have to wait sometimes. Like, people who are reading it live, then you have to wait for the bound version. But January is right around the corner.
Oh, yeah. That's why I thought I was like, okay, I think I can include it. It's close enough.
So we did have some voicemails that came to us, and one of them was from a voice that some people may recognize. It was from St. Louis Public Radio's politics correspondent, Jason Rosenbaum. And he says the best book he read in 2023 was Ringmaster, Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America by Abram Josephine Reisman.
I love this book because I've been a professional wrestling fan for many, many years. My dad and I used to attend wrestling events when I was younger, including WrestleMania 13 at the Rosemont Horizon in suburban Chicago. And what I really, really loved about this book was how Reisman chronicled how ruthless Vince McMahon was in destroying the territory system, including the pro wrestling infrastructure in St. Louis. And I also really thought it was fairly interesting how this concept of something that is make-believe but is presented to the audience as reality has become so ingrained in our cultural and political and everyday life in America. And I think Reisman did a fantastic job of not only providing a historical chronology of Vince McMahon's rise to power, but also a thought-provoking expose into how make-believe and real life can become blurred.
That was Jason Rosenbaum suggesting the book Ringmaster, Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America by Abram Josephine Reisman. And we want to hear your suggestions as well. Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 314-382-TALK. Or send us an email at talk@stlpr.org. Before we go to break, Jennifer, you laughed when you heard So tell me what prompted that response.
Well, I just, first of all, to hear that that he is a wrestling fan did not really surprise me. I don't know why. And I love the idea that your politics correspondent admires something that's fake and performative, and but also a big part of our culture. It just seemed very apt.
And you too.
So that is a very good insight. I was not laughing at that. I was laughing because a good friend of mine keeps recommending this book to me, and I'm like, I'll read it eventually. I've got a lot of stuff I got to read first, but maybe with that glowing review too, I'll bump it up on my list.
I did check out the book, The Wrestling at the Chase, about the so I looked at that one.
Yeah, I mean it's also local and a global phenomenon, right?
Right.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome back. Courtney wrote to us on Facebook that the best book she read this year was the 1976 Alex Haley novel, Roots. She says, I had no idea what I was getting myself into with that tome. The ethnographer in me was impressed by how effectively Haley put the reader in his character's shoes. The first 150 pages of African Years were beautiful. I learned a lot and had a lot of thought-provoking conversations with friends and family about watching the original series on TV as a nation, reactions to the adaptation and the more recent version. Amazing writing, and the story of how it came to be was mind-blowing. It really made its mark on me. So, Jennifer, this is a book that has been out for a long time. Are there any books that people have seemed to sort of either return to or discover anew, even though they've been out for a while?
Oh, yes, that happens all the time. And at the library, we'll be saying, why are we having a whole bunch of holds on this book? Is there a movie coming out or what's happening? And, well, of course, I can't think of any right now, but it definitely does happen. I haven't seen a resurgence in Roots, though. That was very interesting to hear. But, yes, people do go back to things, and there are some that you always buy, the classics, but then sometimes it'll be something odd that you think, oh, people are reading this again. So
Dwight is calling from St. Louis. Dwight, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Oh, thank you. 2 books. Well, actually, there's more than 2, but who has the time? The first is, and this will appeal to people who are fans of the botanical garden. It's called The Hidden Life of Trees.
Ah, yes.
By Peter Wohleben. That's Wohlleben. He's a German forester who works in, I guess, someplace in north-central Bavaria in the mountains there, and manages a forest. And he wrote this absolutely splendid book on anything and everything you would want to understand about forests and the lives of trees, and the way they communicate, even between species.
Right.
It was a beautiful book too. Very high quality paper and just a beautiful object.
Good.
Yeah, you really start.
It's really lovely thing.
I started to get a real appreciation for the feel of a book now that I'm seeing, hundreds every week.
I'm glad to hear that because I was impressed by everything about it. The other writer, really, because he's a writer of some note, is Robert Macfarlane. He's a British nature writer, but he also has written more broadly about civilization. His most recent book is called The Underland, and it was when it was published, he was interviewed by Terry Gross on her program.
So a connection definitely to public radio. Thank you so much, Dwight, for giving those recommendations. Again, those 2 books were The Hidden Life of Trees and Underland. And actually, I have the audiobook of The Hidden Life of Trees. I played that with my son, who's 7.5. We also have a call from Tina. Tina calling from St. Louis. Welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so my book that I just finished reading and I'm getting ready to return it is another nature book. It's called Better Living Through Birding, Notes from a Black Man in the Natural World by Christian Cooper. And if you remember, a few years ago, he was birding out in Central Park. You know, he lives in New York. And he asked this woman to put her dog back on the leash so she was in a birding area, and dogs were supposed to be on their leash. And she got all upset and was trying to call the police on him by threatening to tell him that a black man was threatening her. So I think people remember that incident somewhat.
Tina,
but anyway, the book itself has... Pardon?
Yes, Tina, how was it that you came to that book? Was it recommended to you, or did you happen to see something about it?
Nope, I was just browsing through Webster Grove Library, and
All right.
I came upon it, and I just, browsing.
Yeah. Tina, thank you so much for calling with that recommendation. Again, that is Better Living Through Birding by Christian Cooper. Ted, you were also nodding along, and you recognized that book immediately.
Yes. We I don't remember if it was a suggested purchase or I just saw it and I thought it would make a good addition, but I bought that not too long ago for our library, and I really loved that she just saw it while she was browsing, because when we're looking at buying books, we can see the data for like, oh, so many people have hold for this book, they want to buy this book. So many people have read this book by this author before, so his next book or her next book will probably be popular. But I always try to find some books that are just maybe little gems, stuff that has a striking cover that somebody might see and say, wow, and pull it off and find something new.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's been wonderful what all this technology has done for libraries, the ability to not even leave your home and know what books they have. But when I was a kid, I loved finding a new book at the library, and I've been trying to keep that alive with the stuff that I've been purchasing. So
Yeah.
Webster Groves is not one of my libraries, but I'm glad to know that it's still happening.
Right, and that discovery is still occurring.
Of course, yeah.
We also heard from Mary, who says she's been finding hope in a book, a nonfiction book, called Democracy Awakening by Heather Cox Richardson. The book, which debuted at number 4 on the hardcover nonfiction list, that is an examination of American history through the lens of authoritarianism. Is there a book that you have read that you would like to share with us and with others? Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 314-382-TALK, or email us at talk@stlpr.org. Is there a book on your list, one that's left on your list, Jennifer, that similarly looks at history and what is happening now, why things are the way that they are, and maybe something that has given you hope, too?
Hope. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Actually, right now I'm reading The Fraud by Reidy Smith, and she is just a wonderfully funny and sharp writer. And the plot centers around a missing heir trial. So in the 19th century, when someone is supposedly lost at sea, it could happen that someone just shows up and says, oh, I'm that person, and the fortune is mine. And so that's happening in London, and this is a real trial that actually happened. And so part of her story centers around that. So it's a lot about conspiracy, who believes what, are you who you say you are, and influencing large groups of people. And that's kind of interesting and funny.
And again, that's The Fraud by Reidy Smith. And Reidy Smith was actually a guest on this show in 2021 when she was awarded the St. Louis Literary Award. I wasn't lucky enough to be here at that time, but...
So just the fact that this new book came out, it made me so happy, because listening to all the interviews with her, she's very funny, and she's just unexpected. You never know what she's going to say.
Yeah.
So.
Ted, is there a book that was really funny to you? Something that either tickled your funny bone outright or had sort of a sly way of being humorous?
Yes. So as I said, Golden Kamui is so funny. Really will make you laugh out loud. But I already talked about that. There was another book, a book of short essays called The Book of More Delights, that are just short essays with playful prose. They sort of do, silly things with words about little things you see in your life that you like. One that I really enjoyed was the author was talking about his experience with pull-offs or pull-outs in Vermont roads, where a lot of the roads in Vermont have these special little features where you can pull off to the side of the road to get out of your car and look at the beautiful trees. And how wonderful it is that the environment has impacted the infrastructure in such a pleasant, nice way. And he just did a lot of really great little wordplay about pull-outs, pull-offs. So the craft of writing there is, I'm not sitting there giggling, but it makes you smile, it makes you, appreciate that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And that is The Book of More, in parentheses, Delights by Ross Gay. Does that mean that this is a follow-up?
This is the follow-up. The first one is also very delightful.
Mm-hmm. And like Amy's, we have another ocean-focused actually, Amy is calling from St. Louis, and please join our show. Amy, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah. So the book that I read that was called The Brilliant Abyss.
Mm-hmm.
So the full title is The Brilliant Abyss: Exploring the Majestic Hidden Life of the Deep Ocean and the Looming Threat That Imperils It. And it was written by Helen Scales. So she's a marine biologist from, I guess, Britain.
Mm-hmm.
But, so it was about the animals that live in the deep ocean, and she explains it in a scientific way, like how they're so cool,
mm-hmm.
but in an understandable way.
Yeah.
And it's, like, really interesting and kind of mind-blowing, like
mm-hmm.
just the way all these animals live down there, and they're all just going along, doing their thing, and we don't know because it's far away and it's way down there.
Right.
And how things work with all the pressure and the cold, and she talks about the vents, the hydrothermal vents, and the little mini ecosystems there, and the jellyfish, and a whole lot about sperm whales, which are really cool because they go way down in the water to get their food, to get the squids.
Right.
Every day, all day, that's all they do is swim up and down. They come
mm-hmm.
up to breathe, and they go back down again. So, really cool book.
It sounds like it takes you on quite the journey. Again, that's The Brilliant Abyss by Helen Scales. Amy, thank you so much for calling. And like Amy's, we have another ocean-focused book suggestion, this one from Jackie. Jackie told us that this year she enjoyed reading Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, which posits that humans are not the only sentient beings on the earth. Jackie also liked Cutting for Stone, which she says is a beautifully long and detailed story about the power of love, written by Abraham Verghese. His other novel is The Covenant of Water. Ted?
Remarkably Bright Creatures is actually next on my list. I finished one of these books on my list just 2 days ago, and Remarkably Bright Creatures was next up, so I've got a hold on it now. I think it should be here either today or tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great point about the reading about the deep sea, because we're all over the planet, but we can't go down there. So you see these things. So you have to learn about them.
It reminds me of the posters in the children's area of the library where it's like reading can take you anywhere. And it's silly, and they have the picture of like a kid reading a book, and then all of a sudden he's in, medieval lands. But it's true, especially I loved how she said they scientifically but understandably explain how cool these animals are. That's what I'm looking for.
Right. Well, and speaking of sort of going to another place, is there a book that has had a sort of peculiar ability to transport you somewhere, be it in space or time? Jennifer?
Wow. Well, I don't know, really. Lone Woman is one of the books on my list by Victor Laval. It's kind of, it's been called a horror Western hybrid, which scary books are really not my thing, but this was such an interesting premise. It's about a woman who she lives on a farm in California with her parents. Something terrible happens. The parents are dead. She burns down the house with them in it. And she flees to Montana where she's been told she can get a homestead, and then she has this big steamer trunk with her that has to remain locked. And I like when scary books have a physical manifestation of the awful thing. Like, so she's a woman with a secret and you don't know what it is, but then she's got this big steamer trunk that has to remain locked. So you know it's going to get unlocked at some point. So.
Right. And who knows what that's transporting.
Right. And so this author, he brings in all kinds of other themes about being an outsider. She's an African American in a mostly white and mostly male environment, and so there's all of these other things about being othered and sort of feeling like a stranger at home, and so it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah. And speaking of horror, St. Louis on the Air producer Maya Norfleet has this recommendation from two local creators.
My favorite book that I read this year is a graphic novel called The Atonement Bell. It's by Jim Owsley, and the reason why I enjoyed it so much is because I really liked how the story and the art that was done by Tyler B. Ruff was very familiar because it is set in St. Louis. The architecture, the way that the neighborhoods are designed, even the houses look like St. Louis. That's one of those things, if you know, you know. And it also incorporates a lot of St. Louis history, for better or for worse. And I think, when people think of graphic novels, they might tend to write them off as just something silly, goofy, because it's pictures. But this book, Atonement Bell, is a great example of how graphic novels can really dig deep into some real social issues, and also issues that we can all relate to, like weirdness with our families, different opinions of how to raise your kids or how to live life. And I was really surprised by how much it had me thinking outside of this is a neat book and the art is pretty. It had me really reflecting on my life and the way that I see and do things. And also, I'm a fan of horror, and it is horror. So a lot of witches involved, and I'm into that. So yeah, Atonement Bell.
We'll be back after a short break. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome back. Sandy, or Candy, that is, from St. Louis. Welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Hi, and thank you so much.
Sure. What is your recommendation?
My book is Sharing Mary, which is a book I saw on display last week at the Central Library downtown. Such a beautiful library. And the book has been so exciting for me because it talks about the similarities between the Bible and the Quran, which, of course, is very apropos to our world today for us to see the commonalities between the Christian and the Muslim religions. And so all of these stories in there that we share, and especially exciting for me was that the Quran goes into much more detail about Mary, and it talks about her childhood. So it sort of ties in that element of divine feminine.
Mm-hmm. Candy, thank you so much for calling with that recommendation. And that recommendation, again, is Sharing Mary by Marlies Terborg. We also have a recommendation from one of our staff members. St. Louis Public Radio Senior Development Officer Lisa Kustelo says the best book she read this year was Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. Lisa says the book shines a light on the systems that perpetuate poverty in America and how many of us benefit from those systems that keep others down while exploring how those systems could be fixed. Again, Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. And we have one more from a person on our team. St. Louis on the Air executive producer Alex Hoyer has this recommendation.
One of my favorite books of the year was released in April, and it's called Choosing to Run, a Memoir. It's by long-distance runner and two-time Olympian Des Linden. She famously won the Boston Marathon in 2018 on a cold, windy, and rainy day. I really appreciated her account of that 26.2-mile race, but more so, I appreciated how she described the ups and downs of her career and her experiences of being an outsider but finding her own path to success. Again, that's Choosing to Run, a Memoir by Des Linden.
And again, that is a recommendation from our executive producer, Alex Hoyer. There are many people reading in St. Louis, but there are also many people writing locally. Jennifer, do you have a recommendation for someone who's a local writer with a book that made it onto your list this time?
So one book on my list is actually a second edition of a book that was published in 2017, I believe, so 2017. Yes. Lost Treasures of St. Louis by Cameron Collins. And basically, this is kind of like a coffee table type book of, things that St. Louisans are nostalgic about that may be closed or gone or just over. And whenever you do a big book project like this where you're collecting a bunch of things, as soon as you say, good job, everyone, we did it, then they say, well, oh, what about this? What about this? So this new edition has 130 additional things that they didn't put in the original one. So, and it's also reformatted so that it's smaller. It's more regular book size. The first one was really huge.
Okay.
So.
And Ted, is there a local one for you too?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big science fiction guy. I always have been ever since I was a little boy. And we are lucky here in St. Louis to have who I consider one of the best science fiction writers working today, Ann Leckie, and she came out with the book Translation State this year, which is sort of a sci-fi mystery mashup about a missing intergalactic, I think it might actually be interplanetary, I don't think it matters, translator. And it's really interesting. It's such a unique premise. And Leckie always is able to take these big sci-fi ideas and, the weird names, the weird spellings that you have to remember and make them feel real, make them feel personal, and make them feel important.
Mm-hmm. And that book title again is?
Translation State.
Okay. And Jennifer, yours was?
Lost Treasures of St. Louis.
Right.
Yeah.
And we also have a local connection with a book that was chosen by St. Louis on the Air producer Emily Woodbury. She said it was one of the best books she read this year. It's called Out of Ireland, and it's a novel by St. Louis native Marion O'Shea Wernicke.
Out of Ireland follows the story of 16-year-old Irish teenager Eileen O'Donovan, who's forced to marry an older widower she barely knows. And it's about her older brother Michael, who's in danger after participating in an Irish Republican Brotherhood attack against the British occupation. The pair leave Ireland in the late 1860s and end up making their way to St. Louis. I read this book with my mom for a Mother's Day book club. I thought it'd be fun. We're both of Irish descent, learning about Irish history in the 1860s. And while the story is quite tough at times, had me crying on my front porch in a certain moment of the book, my mom and I had a really great time discussing what it was like to live in and emigrate from Ireland at that time. And the novel also dives into the history of St. Louis's notorious Irish gangs, which was really interesting to learn about. I was checking the map to see if the same, pubs and churches exist in the city today. So if you're into St. Louis and or Irish history, I suggest checking out of Ireland. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the book before cracking it open, you can listen to Elaine's interview with Marion O'Shea Wernicke. You can find that on our website, stlonair.show, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Out of Ireland is by Marion O'Shea Wernicke, and I was not expecting that bit of shout out, but please do. We had a great conversation.
Ever the producer.
Oh, right. We're talking about some of the best books of the year. If you want to see both Ted's and Jennifer's lists, you can find them online now at stlonair.show. Susan is calling from Fowler, Illinois. Susan, briefly, what is your book recommendation?
Well, I wanted to say that as an older adult, I have trouble holding books and reading them. And my little library that's a few miles away from me allows us to log on to a site called Hoopla. And I listen to a lot of books, so I don't read a lot of books, but I listen to a lot of books. And it's a wonderful way to keep yourself into that way of learning new things. But this book is called Go as a River by Shelley Reid, R-E-A-D, and it is set back in the 1940s, and she and her family raise peaches in and around Denver, Colorado, and Gunnison. And, of course, you know, it's a very impoverished time, and women don't have much of a say. And she falls in love at 17 with an Indian, Native American, and she talks about their love, but everyone else would say it was illicit. And the young man is drugged behind a truck and killed because he's a dirty Indian. And all she can see is the love that they had because she's 17 and doesn't know any of the differences.
Mm-hmm.
And
it has a connection actually to the book that we heard about by Marion O'Shea Wernicke. Starts with someone who is very young. Susan, thank you so much for calling from Fowler, Illinois, which is just northeast of Quincy. And again, the book that she recommends is Go as a River by Shelley Reid. So to this point about books that you can enjoy not only on a page, but through an audio experience, are there any, Ted, that come to mind for you, whether they're on your list or not, that also fit that bill?
So I've heard, and I haven't listened to it myself. I get too distracted for audiobooks, unfortunately. But I have heard that the Chain Gang All-Stars, which is actually my number one book of the year, audiobook, is very good. That book is about sort of a near-future dystopia that might not even be so far of a dystopia than, from where we are. The author includes footnotes of real-life statistics of the treatment of prisoners and prisoners in general, to sort of tie this fictional story in the future to our present day and really ground it, which really makes it strike home just as much as the wonderful characters in the book do as well.
Jennifer, one of the books that I noticed on your list is it's a first-person account by someone who is not from the United States, to sort of continue on this. It's by Canadian author Naomi Klein.
Oh, right.
Yeah, tell us about this book.
So this was such an interesting premise. So it seems like just a small little cocktail party story, but the author Naomi Klein was finding that she was becoming confused often with the author Naomi Wolf. They were both sort of iconoclastic female authors, and so it wasn't a big problem or anything. It was just a funny thing. It's like, oh, that's not me, whatever. But then Naomi Wolf started getting associated with more like conspiracy theories and anti-vax stuff. And Naomi Klein found that it was affecting her because people are assuming that was her. Mm-hmm. And so when she was getting work, people were making all kinds of assumptions about her. And so then from that thing, that incident, she wrote an entire book about our divided political life now and how people make assumptions about other groups, the other side, quote unquote. But they're actually, she calls it the mirror world because they're behaving exactly the same. And so she basically pointed out the similarities between partisans on both sides. And it was just a good rumination about what our life is like now.
Mm-hmm. And that is Doppelganger, A Trip into the Mirror World by Naomi Klein. We have Licia calling from St. Louis. Licia, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you. The book that I want to recommend is not something that I would recommend it being read. I recommend it being listened to. Leslie Jones's memoir, which is called Leslie Effing Jones, is a book where she is almost like she's on a set. She's not reading verbatim. She's talking about her story. She's very emotional. She laughs about things and she cries about things. It is such a good book. Awesome book.
Yes. Alicia, thank you so much for calling. And I will say I was listening to that as I was driving in to work today, and it is really hilarious. Again, that is Leslie Effing Jones by Leslie Jones.
But I've heard something, and I'm not sure if it's true, that the audiobook is so much longer because she just kept going.
I think I saw something about how somebody had said it might be twice as long as the
actual book.
Mm-hmm.
So she just kind of kept going.
Yeah, but it is really entertaining, and it feels like she's talking to you. So as we wrap up here, I'd like to know from each of you which of the books we haven't talked about yet that you want to make sure people hear about, and then that they'll either pick it up or will listen to it.
So the one that I'd really love for people to read is something that sort of came about only because I was doing this job. It's called Apparel Has No Gender. And the reason that I found out about it is that it was nominated or won an award at the Jewish Book Festival that we're having in St. Louis, or maybe already have had. And it's an account of raising a transgender child that deals with all the things that you might think. But the focus that it has on love and acceptance is really, I mean, one of the most incredible things I ever read. I was reading through it, just flipping to a random page and reading it when we got it in to see what it was like, since we purchased this right away to get it in time for the festival buzz. And I found myself, I had to hold the book away from myself so I didn't, get our brand new copy wet with tears, because it's a beautiful story, and especially there was a chapter about the author's parents, how they handled dealing with the news that their grandchild was transgender.
Mm-hmm. That's Apparel Has No Gender by Jeff Bender. And Jennifer, in our last minute, what else should we read?
Be Mine by Richard Ford. Richard Ford began a long and very celebrated literary career in the 1980s, and this is the final novel featuring his character Frank Bascom, and it dealt a lot with being older and having a terminally ill son. Very good.
And again, that is Be Mine by Richard Ford. These are some recommendations for best books of 2023. Jennifer Alexander is Collection Development Librarian at St. Louis County Library, and Ted Reidy is Material Selector at St. Louis Public Library. Ted and Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your recommendations.
Thank you.
This episode was produced by Emily Woodbury.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.